Hello, this is another episode of Broken Into Purpose, and I am your host, Khalilah Johnson. I am excited about today's subject matter. It's not that it's a great subject matter. It's not exciting, but it's truthful. And I get excited when we talk about truth because I believe once we get to the truth and we start to identify root causes, then there is where freedom is found. So let's begin with prayer. Father God, we just call on you to have your way. Empty me, Lord. I am your vessel. Have your way. Less of me, more of you. Holy Spirit, allow someone to receive a word today. So we're needing you to be our teacher. In Jesus' name, amen. So today, the title of today's show, Dysfunctional Norm. We talked about that last week, and we're going to talk about it again. This will be part 2 of Dysfunctional Norm. There's so many different areas that we can talk about when it comes to dysfunctional, but really what we want to get to are the habits that start to form in dysfunction and that we don't realize we have and is affecting negatively our life, our decisions, who we come in contact with, relationships that we stay together with. So one of the things we talked about a lot of things with dysfunction. We kind of gave overall different views, but dysfunctional norms, the normal things that we do every day that become our norm, or it's just my personality. Well, maybe it isn't. And maybe we can help someone get to the root cause of the reason why you keep connecting with people that don't know how to treat you. The reason why you keep allowing yourself to replay things and that keep you bound. And bad habits, bad situations. Maybe the self-medicating is because you have formed habits and they've become a dysfunctional norm. So one of the things I want to talk about, healthy relationships. I believe that dysfunctional norms are coming from a healthy relationship. And when you don't have a healthy perception of self, that's where dysfunction comes. And it definitely, most likely comes usually from how we are either raised, some experiences that we have that when we are forming in our developmental years, how are we seen? And that may contribute to a lot of things that we are dealing with today. So we have so many different areas of dysfunctional norm, but there's a few things that I want to share with you. One of the things that I want to start off sharing with you is I have this book, and I have it right in front of me. I want to also always give acknowledgement to the authors. It's by Glenn R. Schiraldi, PhD, and it's called the Self-Esteem Workshop. And I got this book because I wanted to use it to help young women and see what other information that I can learn. I'm always trying to read. I'm always trying to learn something more. God has given me wisdom through experience, but I don't believe that that's enough. I am, back in school. I just want to keep moving as far as learning, and I believe we all owe it to ourselves, but also those that are around us and the next generation in order to do and continue to try to unpack, learn as much as we can. So one of the things that I found in this, it talks about automatic thoughts and distortion, and this is where we have to get rid of, in order to get rid of the distorted thoughts, we have to really try to get to the root of what they are, and then where they come from, and then how do we replace them with healthiness. So first thing that it says automatic thoughts and distortion. And I highlighted a couple of areas. It says, whenever an upsetting event occurs, automatic thoughts run through your mind. Although we're capable of thinking reasonably about upsetting events, sometimes our automatic thoughts are distorted or unreasonably negative. Distorted automatic thoughts occur so rapidly that we hardly notice them, let alone stop to question them. Yet the automatic thoughts profoundly affect our mood and our sense of worth. In this section, it talks about the different areas, and one of the first things that comes up is assuming. And we have all been there. I have been there, and we have all been guilty of wrongly making assumptions. But a lot of times we make our assumptions based off of our experiences. And so when we can have distorted views, it determines how we hear people, how we see people. There are stereotypes. I believe racism is from an assumption made off of visualizations and experiences, or also just bombardment of lies and deception that is to form a perception. And so it automatically, when you see someone, when people talk about seeing a whole group of people and believing that they are no good because they have been seeing movies and media, and these people look this way, so they must all be this way. How they can connect, and I believe with, and I'm going calling up all over the place with this, but I believe this is a subject matter that we definitely understand, the dysfunctional norms, because we start to associate hoodies and zipping up, jackets, and with urban gear, and that means an urban gear connected to crime, murder, criminal. And so that association that we make, it is a part of the assumptions that we take in, and that's why it's so important that we evaluate what we're taking in, as well as evaluate where did it come from. Some assumptions can be made to believe, if someone continues to steal from me, that person, and I leave my wallet, there's a likelihood that, based off of my experience with that person, that person will possibly do it again. There is a character, you learn from someone based off of what they've shown you about them. And so with assumptions, we just make assumptions, and they're usually general, they're usually wrong, they're usually based off of what we believe. Sometimes they're based off of rumors that have been spread. Sometimes it's based off of one person's interaction with someone and their bad assumption. And so let me read you what they say, okay? I'm gonna give you just a line. It says, in these circumstances, we assume the worst without testing the evidence. And it's an amazing thing, because that's what assumption is. It is an assumption is not even testing the evidence. It is sometimes based off of, well, my friend doesn't like you, or my husband doesn't like you, or all of these different things. But sometimes we don't understand that we can take an opinion from someone who has assumptions made off of their own distorted reality. So another one is shoulds, must, oughts, and I didn't completely understand it at first until I read through it, and it says I should have known better. And we're talking about automatic thoughts of distortions where we take blame for things I guess when they talk about I should have, I must have, I ought to have known better, we start to have these self-defeating thoughts about the decisions that we've made, and we take responsibility for far more than we should. I'm not saying don't take responsibility for the decisions that you have in your power, but there are some things that happen outside of our power that we start to take blame for, and that starts to create a distorted reality, which are dysfunctional norms that create dysfunctional norms of ways of thinking about ourselves. And an example is, I used to, when I was dealing with relationships, definitely relationships that would put me down, in order for me to gain control over it, I would have to take responsibility, so that by taking responsibility, I could say, if I could change, if I could do, if I should have done this, then that wouldn't have happened. It's something that happens with an abused person. Because of violation happens, when violation happens, especially when you're raped or molested or some type of form of abuse, you want the abused victim sometimes they deal with control issues. And the reason why, and even though you may not connect the self-defeated thought that everything is your fault, it is, some people think of control as, and in some areas they're controlling in the sense of I want to control everything around me, but also there's a defeating attitude that we want to control everything that's wrong, and you want to take responsibility, because it still puts you somewhere in the control chair that says this happened because. And if I can take responsibility for all the bad things that are happening to me, then somehow I can control, I could have controlled it. Because it's nothing worse than feeling like someone came in and violated you or victimized you or did something to you and you are powerless. And so the victim's mindset is, sometimes it can sway both ways. But in some areas, we sometimes have taken on the idea that it must have been my fault. The relationship went bad because of me. So when, an ex said to me, if you didn't do this, I would never have cheated on you. If you had been a better woman, I remember hearing someone say, if you had goals, then you would be in the ranking, and I would not have gone out and looked for someone else. And taking on those responsibilities that were not mine. First of all, you have control over your own body, your decisions, and who you want to spend your life with. You have a decision to make me aware that you no longer want this relationship. You had the decision to be sneaky, lying, deceitful, disrespectful. You had the decision how you carried your own self. And I do not take responsibility for the decisions of how you choose to see me or how you choose to value the relationship that you committed to. And so that's the turning it around. But that happened after growing. That happened after realizing who I was. And it happened after fighting the dysfunctional norms. And the reason why I stayed in relationship after relationship that were abusive was because it was that child who was told, you aren't good enough. You're not smart enough. Everything you do, you deserve to be punished. And so when there was a lot of beating, it was a lot of everything you did, you didn't know what to do. You come into a room, there's yelling, there's speeding, there's get the belt. You did something wrong. There is this thing that gets imparted into a child when all they see is discipline, but no learning, just discipline, is that you are bad. And so growing up, you start to make these decisions based off of that ideology of, I am bad, I'm not good, I keep making bad decisions, if I could just be good. And so when you connect with someone, you usually connect, an abuser usually connects with a villain. A victim connects with a villain. An abuser connects with an abuser. The abused connect with the abuser. Let me correct that. And so because of that, you are looking for something to confirm the ideals or the thoughts that you have been subjected to, the things that you are wrapped around, the things that develop your mindset. And so some of the behaviors that can start to exhibit in this day and time, especially with relationships, are relationships, if you are always being accused, there is something maybe in you and you accept those accusations without second guessing them. There may have been something that has happened that you may need to connect with and disconnect from. There's a root to this thought. So the next thing that reasons why we are formed in dysfunction and the self-defeating attitudes. It goes on to say the fairy tale fantasy, and it says the fairy tale fantasy means demeaning the ideal from life. This is really a special type of should. That's not fair, or why did that have to happen? Often means the world shouldn't be the way it is. In reality, bad and unfair things happen to good people, sometimes randomly, sometimes because of the unreasonableness of others, and sometimes because of our own imperfections. To expect that the world be different is to invite disappointment. To expect that others treat us fairly when they often have their own ideas about what is fair is also to invite disappointment. Again, a would or a could is a wise substitute for a should. It would be nice if things were ideal, but they're not. Too bad. Now I wonder what I could do to improve things. The fairy tale fantasy. When I saw the fairy tale fantasy, there was another thought that came to mind. I was thinking about the distortion of where when life is so hard that you recreate things to be a one way. And so something happens where there is a deception that starts to, it's like a coat of deception that pretty much distorts everything that you see, because you have to make things that are not right appear to be perfect or good in your eyes, because you can't face the decisions that you've made. And I've seen that happen so often. I've had family members where I've seen where they created a whole other, it's not that bad. Abuse happens right in front of their eyes. Ridiculous, out of control things have happened. And in order for them to stay in that relationship, they have to create a fairy tale. So I just thought about that, because there's another aspect. I know that this is a fairy tale fantasy, and but the other part of being distorted is creating a whole world of how you would rather things appear a certain way rather than them be a certain way. And it also keeps you in bondage, because now your eyesight is so distorted. It's like not being able to see. You're blinded. and you start to create a whole new reality, and it's based off of lies that you tell yourself. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. And this is Khalilah Johnson on Broken Into Purpose on the Overcame by Radio. And I hope that you'll come back and join us for the second half of this show. And again, today's title is The Dysfunctional Norm. So let's talk about that when we get right back. So since you guys are here with me, we're going to just continue on with that while we take that little bit of a break. But I hope that for someone is getting that right now, that dysfunctional norm, we all have something. If you think about it, there's no one walking this earth that has nothing. There's some type of dysfunctional norm in our communication. There's some type of dysfunctional norm in the way that we interpret our reality. There's some type of dysfunctional norm, maybe even founded in gossip and slander and the addiction to gossip and slander. And there's something that is embedded in our self-esteem. Even if you have not experienced it on that level, there is some level in some way that you can start to evaluate yourself, your situation, the relationships around, in order to make better, healthier relationships. I'm coming from a place that every day that there is a new desire that God shows me who I am. And in order that he do that, I have to be open into receiving new revelations daily, weekly, monthly. So you're not talking to a perfect person. You're talking to a person that desires to know better, to do better, to think better. And so because of that, those are the decisions that we make. So let's go back. And we're back. Again, this is Khalilah Johnson, and you're listening to Broken Into Purpose on the Overcame by Radio. What we're talking about is the dysfunctional norm, getting to the root of issues, getting to the root of things, and the reasons why we make the decisions that we make. And we were talking about the different forms of dysfunctional norms are based off of ideas, thoughts, patterns that begin and form usually when we're very young. But what happens is that these thoughts and ideas become and create a distorted reality. And I'm reading from the book, The Self-Esteem Workshop from Glenn R. Schiraldi, PhD, and it says all or nothing. Some of the things we were going down the different thinking patterns that are distortions. And the other paragraph is all or nothing thinking. And that's a good one. Because even without reading it, I can imagine that all or nothing thinking, it's like it's either black or white. And that is a dysfunctional way of thinking. It has to be this way or it's not that way. With all or nothing thinking, you hold yourself to the impossible standard of perfection or something close to it. When you fall short of this standard, you conclude that you are a total failure as a person. For example, if I'm not the best, I'm a flop. If I'm not performing perfectly, I'm a loser. If I score below 90%, I'm a failure. A rough edge means I'm all bad. This is unreasonable because such absolute black and white extremes rarely exist. Even if it were possible to perform perfectly, it isn't. Performing below some standard usually means we've performed at 80% or 35%. Rarely at 0%. And poor performance never makes a complex person worthless, just fallible. Ask yourself, why must I bat 1,000? And so I think about that situation, and I apologize. I think about that situation. I'm a visual person, and so the reason why I'm a storyteller and I pull from my experiences is because, first of all, I think that's the greatest wisdom, is what you've walked in, overcome, and gone through. And although I use resources, from experts, I still do believe that there is something too when you evaluate real life situations. And so when I think about the all or nothing attitude, I think about people, overachievers, those that were raised in a home of overachieving. And so that became the most important thing in that family's life, is to make sure that they had a certain perception or give a certain perception of perfection. And I find that very ironic. I also find that looking at those families a little closer, and what I do know and what I can see now is that a lot of the ones that have, they've been pushed to go to school, get the degree at the risk of not allowing there to be clear, healthy communication, because maybe however the parents were raised and whatever they went through, those things were the ideal of what it look like to be successful? And so even though that is successful, that is not the only arena of success. So some things begin to be neglected, such as the well-being of the children, and they begin to race after or chase after an ideal of perfection that no one can actually live up to. And so then there are guilt trips, and then there are guilt and a shame, and when that person gets those things, and then all of a sudden you realize these people have several degrees, but they aren't able to make good decisions, that they're trapped inside of a adult body, but they are not able to live functionally as an adult. Now they've got the degrees, but they have no life experience because they were never allowed to actually communicate or express hurt or express anything that seemed to look like failure. And so they've been locked inside themselves, and they did not mature emotionally. And sometimes I even see self-medication heavily, inability to function as an adult on their own. Now they've got all of this education, but they have no life skills. And so that I think about that all or nothing, because there's guilt trips, and all of a sudden these people are easily able to be crashed, easily able to be baited, and easily able to take things so personally that they can't control their emotions. So that definitely is something that we can look at, because when we think of dysfunction, the dysfunctional norm, sometimes we bypass those that seem to have their stuff together, but in actuality, there's so many different things that make up healthy. When you focus on one area, and one area alone as being the ideal of your success, and then everything else gets neglected, usually that also forms dysfunctional norms. And so the other area is overgeneralizing. Overgeneralizing is deciding the negative experiences describe your life completely. For example, I always ruin things. I always get rejected in love. No one likes me. Everybody hates me. I never do well in math. I actually had to stop myself from saying that. I was going back to school, and I was trying to get a math down, and I was like, this sounds like Japanese. I don't understand it. And I had to change the thoughts and even the words that I spoke out of my mouth to say, I am a genius in this. And no, it's not just positive thinking, but I recognize that with all that I have been able to do, I understand that God did give me a mind. And so if he's given me a mind, if it can be done, then I can do it. And so changing that around gives me and takes it off of making it personal to something that I am defeated, changing the defeated attitude. And so and it also goes on to say, the antidote is to use more precise language. Some of my skills are not yet well developed. I'm not as tactful in some social situations as I'd like. Sometimes people don't approve of me. Sometimes people do. Although some aspects of my life haven't gone well, that doesn't mean I never do reasonably well. Be a healthy optimist. Expect to find small ways to improve situations and notice what's going well. And it does not mean, some people will listen to this and maybe hear, you mean just pretend, or no, a healthy reality is definitely important. I'm not telling you, and I'm sure this book is not telling you to not be honest with yourself. But what it is saying is that rewording and rerouting the thoughts from a place of hopelessness to a place of destiny and a place of hopefulness. There are things that we can be completely honest with ourselves. At this moment, I don't do well, but knowing the God that we serve, who says that we can do all things through Christ, it starts to prepare us to do better than we can even imagine. And so we change those thoughts and to the things that we can do. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me is a definite verse that I use whenever coming up against something where there's resistance. And the truth of the matter is, when you deal with something that is resistance, that is usually something that truly can grow you. There's no growth in being comfortable all the time. It's no growth in going to a place where you already have everything figured out. It's no growth in knowing everything already. So the fact that we are more than overcomers, or that we are more than conquerors, then that means that there is more to us than meets the eye. And so when we get to that resistance, it means that push past. Because on the other side of that, there lies our destiny, our purpose, our greater selves that we would have never imagined having this limited, defeated mindset. And so the next one, and we're almost done with these, and it says labeling. Here you give yourself a label or name as though a single word describes a person completely. For example, I'm such a loser. And I'm not saying that. I'm such a loser. One of those mindsets. Oh, I always, I know that there were times whenever it was almost like a reaction. I always do that. Man, stupid, or something that is so